Declan Rice, and obviously the amount that's been gone for Jude Bellingham.
Yeah.
Everyone had a horrible season last year at Chelsea. It just was the doldrums, and obviously Mount's wanted to go. Mount brings to Chelsea, when he was in form and playing really, really well, he was like the metronome for Chelsea. And I think you're going to see that again at United with Mount. He's going to revitalise him, and he's going to have an amazing season, and he's going to really, really bring something to United that's been missing for a long time. And I think for £55 million, I think Mount's probably about a £70, £80 million player, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right, because ultimately the reason he's at that price is because he's got a year left on his contract and he won't sign a new contract. So he's definitely worth more than United paid for him. And I think that's something that's worth bearing in mind. Are you a Chelsea fan yourself, Dave?
No, I'm actually a Gillingham fan, to be honest.
All right, okay, no worries. I just picked up that you weren't a United fan. I mean, look, what's your observation on you mentioned the Declan Rice deal there. Do you think that that's just too much money, or do you think he's not good enough to play for Arsenal?
I think Rice is, again, a very good player, but again, I think he's just the typical English player, overpriced. Rice is probably, again, about a defensive midfielder, sort of untapped potential, playing under Moisey, didn't really get the best out of him. I mean, again, we might see this season Arteta get the best out of him, becomes a world beater, and just has an amazing season. So again, he's about a £78 million player, I think.
Declan Rice's game that's not been seen at West Ham because he plays a very restricted defensive role. There is more in Declan Rice's locker in a team where he can be expansive to come. And I think that's the exciting thing for Arsenal. Remember, we're taking your calls on 03717 22 3344. I am going to implement a few things after 6 o'clock, certainly around Harry Kane and a few other topics. But after this show at 7 o'clock, don't miss the Ashes Inquest at 7 p.m. tonight, right after this show. John Norman and Steve Harmison will review a thrilling second test as the Aussies controversially take a 2-0 lead in the Ashes. So keep an ear out for that Inquest following us at 7 o'clock. But we'll be taking more of your calls after the break. And I want to talk about Harry Kane and whether he should be leaving Spurs this summer or whether they should be holding on to him. I think he's got to go. Get your calls in. I'll speak to you after the break.
Friendly SAE on the way. Hostile UAV in the area.
Reloading.
Enemy UAV overhead. We're getting overrun.
On 1089 and 1053 medium wave, on your mobile and on your smart speaker. Talk Sport. Hey mate, you looking for a bit of sport on the side, yeah? Try Talk Sport 2. They got lashings of live cricket, NFL, rugby, darts, horse racing, and 20 years worth of Talk Sport best bits. Talk Sport 2 is on DAB, on the app, and on your smart speaker. It's your other national sports radio station.
Mark Goldbridge on the Transfers Insiders on Talk Sport. We're going to take more of your calls about transfers and everything else after the news and sport with Toby Gillies.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Coming up, France fears more violence and England lose the second Ashes test in controversial circumstances. The grandmother of the teen shot dead by police in France has called for an end to the violence that has followed his death. French authorities have again mobilised 45,000 police and gendarmes on the streets of the country's largest cities. French political commentator Agnès Poirier says the protesters are destroying their own neighbourhoods.
Rioters and the looters are attacking, torching the cars of their neighbours, the cars of their parents, the buses, the trams that they need to use to go to work.
2 people have died and 28 are injured, 3 critically. After a mass shooting at a block party in Baltimore, no arrests have been made. The NHS will almost double the number of gambling addiction clinics in England this summer after a record year for referrals. 7 clinics will open across the country, including in Thurrock, Blackpool, Sheffield and Bristol. And plenty of crying over spilt milk today. The M6 motorway has seen queues of 9 miles near Lancaster after a milk tanker overturned. It spilt milk across all lanes of the northbound carriageway from junction 31 to 32.
TalkSport weather with QuickFit. Claim your free Kodak instant camera when you buy 2 or more Michelin Cross Climate tyres. Book today at quickfit.com or your local centre and drive away happy every time.
Any showers easing this evening, though they will persist in the west overnight. Cloudy in the north with some outbreaks of rain on their way in the early hours, drier elsewhere.
TalkSport Sports Update with Lookers. With over 140 dealerships across the UK, it's the place to find new and used cars and vans. Visit lookers.co.uk.
Ben Stokes says he wouldn't want to win an Ashes test with a contentious wicket after Australia took the second test with what was without a doubt the most controversial moment of the series so far. Johnny Bairstow's wicket today will be tough to top in the remainder too. He was run out after leaving his crease when he thought the play had ceased. Lords went ballistic, calling Australia cheats, and these England fans told TalkSport the Aussies did overstep the mark.
Unsportsmanly, and it is just against the spirit of the game. Fine, it might be legal, but if you're going to win the match anyway, probably, why do you need to win it in that scummy way?
He definitely made his mark. The ball was dead, but it's the only way the Aussies can beat us at the moment, I think.
The MCC has apologised after some of its members confronted Aussie players in the long room in the pavilion over it when they walked off for lunch. England lost by 43. Stokes, fired up by the controversy, top scoring with 155 at one stage, looked like he might lead them to an unlikely win. Liverpool have confirmed the signing of Dominik Szoboszlai from RB Leipzig. They triggered the release clause on Friday. It's worth €70 million. That's just over £60 million. It's understood it's a 5-year deal for the Hungarian. Andy Murray has admitted he could have achieved more during his tennis career as we approach the 10-year anniversary of his maiden Wimbledon triumph. He's won 3 Grand Slams in one of the greatest eras of tennis. And Max Verstappen won the Austrian Grand Prix. Remember, you can head over to TalkSport 2 right now to hear the England under-21s in quarter-final action of the Euros. They're up against Portugal, currently leading by a goal to nil.
On 1089 and 1053 medium wave, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker.
Totally topical transfer talk.
Fabulous stuff at Transfer Insiders with Mark Goldbridge on TalkSport.
Hello, welcome to the Transfer Insiders with myself, Mark Goldbridge, on TalkSport. This hour, we're going to be taking a look at more transfer movements and stories. Obviously, Liverpool have just signed Dominik Szoboszlai. Liverpool fans, what are your thoughts on that? If you sort that midfield out, are you the main challengers for Manchester City next season, considering you've been there before? Or Arsenal, do you need to add a striker to your interestingly efficient transfer window so far? But before we get into all of that, keep your calls coming in, 03717 22 33 44. Really want to hear from you, but I did promise to talk about this in the first hour and we missed it, so I'm going to come back to it. Harry Kane. What is going to happen with Harry Kane at Spurs? Bayern Munich apparently determined to pay what it takes to get Harry Kane out of Spurs and up front for Bayern Munich. I completely understand why they would want to do that. They lacked... I actually thought Bayern Munich played very well against Manchester City in the Champions League. They just didn't have a striker, and they had a very poor performance from Upamecano, which took the game away from them. So you can see why Bayern Munich would want Harry Kane. Apparently Harry Kane hasn't officially handed in any transfer request, but he is making it very clear that he will not be signing a new contract. This creates a scenario for Spurs where if they keep Harry Kane for a year, maybe he scores 30 goals, I still don't think you get top 6, and then he walks out the door for 0. Is now the time, Spurs fans, for Harry Kane to leave? Is this the time where Daniel Levy and Tottenham's hierarchy really have to say this stubbornness isn't anything more than an ego fest? Because the reality is, if you take £80 million for Harry Kane now, you start the rebuild a year early with £80 million, whereas in a year's time, he's gone for nothing anyway. I understand why they wouldn't want to sell him to Manchester United or Newcastle or Chelsea because it's a Premier League rival. But surely a sale to Bayern Munich, out of sight, out of mind, £80 million. The biggest thing would be, how would you spend that £80 million? I know there's talk of Jonathan David and people like that. But for what Spurs are doing under a new manager, it's a bit like Mason Mount and Havertz and Kovacic leaving Chelsea as Pochettino comes in a way that helps with Pochettino. It's extra funds, it's a new start. I don't understand this. Clearly Harry Kane would like to move. Clearly you're not going to get any money in a year's time. Is it really worth keeping Harry Kane for another year, Spurs fans? I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that, because I just think that it's time for him to move on, which is perfect actually, because we've got Rich, who's a Spurs fan, and he wants to talk about Harry Kane. So do you agree with what I've just said there, Rich, or have you got an opinion that you should keep him?
I don't agree with anything you said. I want to know where this clearly he wants to leave come from. This clearly he's not going to sign a new contract come from. I just think, I'm just sick to death, to be honest with you. I listen to Talk Sport on the way home from work every day, and I'm just sick to death. I've had 6 years of Talk Sport trying to sell Harry Kane. That's all you lot have done for 6 years, of tried to sell Harry Kane. Goodbye.
Thanks, Rich. Just to confirm, we do not own Harry Kane. We cannot sell Harry Kane. Look, Rich is obviously a Spurs fan who's just finding it hard to deal with the fact that Harry Kane does want to leave Spurs because he's not negotiating a new contract. Harry Kane could stay at Spurs. He could sign a new contract. And he will retire without a trophy, he will retire without a winner's medal, but he will retire with Alan Shearer's goal scoring record. I think Harry Kane's better than that. I speak to fans different to Rich, who say, look, Rich obviously doesn't think so, but there you go. And, a little bit like Spurs, Rich, you didn't let me come back, you bottled it. But let's get another Spurs fan, Adrian, I don't know whether you heard what Rich had to say, but what are your thoughts on Harry Kane, and should he be running his contract down, or should you be moving him on this summer?
I did hear what Rich said, and I promise you I will not hang up like he did. But I honestly think that there's a very high possibility he's going to run his contract down till the end of the season, and then he's going to sign a totally new contract on a much higher wage. If you actually look at the club that would actually want Harry Kane at 32 years old, or however old he's going to be, I think you're looking at hardly anyone. Arsenal, I don't think, will want him, and he certainly wouldn't go to Arsenal. Perhaps Chelsea, but only because Pochettino's there. And let's face it, he might not be there for very long. Manchester United, perhaps. But apart from that, I think most clubs would look at him as saying, okay, he'll win nothing, because, this is coming from a Tottenham fan, Tottenham are, a disaster in so many different ways, but he will be loved forever. Adrian,
I just want to ask you one question. If you were Daniel Levy and you had the power here, would you be pushing the move to Bayern to get £80 million for the new manager? Or would you run the risk of... You'd run that risk of another year, yeah?
Well, but here's the question you've got to ask yourself. Okay, 80 million. What can you get? And you never know. James Maddison and him with Son could pair up as a trio and be absolutely fantastic. I'm not saying they're going to win anything, because Tottenham are too Spursy for that. But I think he's going to stay. I really do.
Adrian, fantastic call. Thanks for not hanging up. Let's go to another Spurs fan. We've got Reese, who actually wants to talk about the Maddison and Kane link-up. Is that something that you think might cause Harry Kane to actually elongate his stay at Spurs then, or would you cash in, Reese?
Well, you're right there, Mark. My personal opinion is Harry Kane's got... You talk about loyalties in football nowadays, and it's all about the money. But I definitely do think Harry Kane has got his loyalties to Spurs, and I think in a perfect world, Harry Kane stays as a Spurs fan. But at the end of the day, in football's about money, and if he wants trophies and if he wants all the success, good luck to him. Do you know what I mean? I hope he has a good career. But personally, if I was Harry Kane and I move elsewhere, and all of a sudden all of my Spurs lovers, because as Tottenham fans we all love Harry Kane, there's no doubt about it, but would you rather kill your legacy and go somewhere else as a Tottenham fan? Because personally, if he went to another Premier League club, I would still respect him as a player, but I wouldn't say dead to me, but he's not still in my good books. But I think Harry Kane over the past few years since Eriksen's left has had to play a two-man role. He's had to play the number 10, where you see him drop back, and he's had to play that striker position. No player should be expected to play two roles to the level that he has done. And play that striker position. No player Harry Kane should be expected to play two roles. It gives us one final chance with Harry Kane to win a trophy. And if we do, I personally see Harry Kane staying.
Interesting. A couple of people have said Harry Kane's 30 heading to 31. He's 29 heading to 30. So you've still got a bit of time with him. What I was going to ask Reese was, I suppose if I phrase this scenario, if Harry Kane behind the scenes has said to Daniel Levy, I want to go, but I'm not going to put an official transfer request in, and Daniel Levy's got an offer from Bayern Munich there, knowing that and knowing that he's probably going to leave for nothing next summer, would you sell him to Bayern and take the 80 million now, or would you gamble on next season he might change his mind?
But you've got to understand, at the end of the day, like Adrian said before, what does 80 million buy you nowadays? If Mason Mount, I personally don't understand the Mason Mount slander, but I do not think he's a £60 million player. If you telling me Harry Kane is worth 20 million more than Mount, and I can understand the contract, but at the end of the day, back in the day when we sold Bale, and I know the players we bought in weren't spectacular and they didn't set the club alight, but the money we had for Bale was enough to rebuild. 80 million is not enough to rebuild.
Yeah, good point. Reese, thank you very much for calling in. Really appreciate that. We've got a few Spurs fans who are calling in at the moment about this Harry Kane situation. And the surprise for me is that a lot of Spurs fans are saying, what do you get for 80 million? Keep him. In fact, we've got, is it Eli says Harry Kane could end up staying long term. Do you really think that could happen, Eli?
To be honest with you 3 or 4 Tottenham Hotspur fans who have phoned in and we've listened to so far, it's a double-edged sword. The crack is, at the end of the day, one, it's loyalty that everybody should respect, not pound notes or cups, loyalty. And the main thing is, where did Tottenham Hotspur find the goals that Harry scored last season and the other seasons coming into this new season with the new manager? The goals won't be there. We'll end up middle of the table or just beneath and a begging bowl out of cups because we haven't got a goal scorer. The Richarlison, Christ, if he ain't on the injury bench, I don't know where the man is. And he's scored 3-4 goals for us. He'll stay with the club because 80 million quid ain't worth the goals that we would not get to keep us in the Premiership or in at least middle of the table. The goals are not there from the team. Not from Maddison, not from Richarlison. Maddison and the Kane Son, our ginger Swede link up, I see that, but we need goals from our goalkeepers and the defence. So that's got to be worked on the right as well. But back to Harry, for me, the man stays. Loyalty means more, goals mean more to our club. And Levy, you should be pulling your finger out to get that man signed up for another 3-year contract.
Eli, thank you very much. Great call. Lots of passion there. We're hearing from Spurs fans, don't sell him for £80 million. We won't get anything in. Let's keep him and try and get him on a new contract. Let's get back to England under-21s against Portugal under-21s in the European Championship quarter-final. Ian Abrahams has got an update for us.
Yeah, Mark, England 1, Portugal 0. That goal on 34 minutes scored by Anthony Gordon as England come forward again through Jacob Ramsey down the left-hand side. But the second half largely has been played in England territory with Portugal in the ascendancy, especially their number 11, Francisco Conceição. He's been absolutely terrific in the second half. He's actually been fouled a couple of times by Max Aarons, and Aarons now has a second yellow card in this tournament, which means that he will miss Wednesday's semi-final with Israel if England indeed get there. We've got to worry about that first. James Trafford hasn't had a save to make in the second half. The nearest Portugal to come, substitute Paulo Bernardo with a header at the near post that flashed across goal and went wide. England at the moment hanging on to that lead that was given to them by Anthony Gordon on 34 minutes. It's live on TalkSport 2. We've reached the hour mark. England 1, Portugal 0.
Thank you there. And just interesting we're live on YouTube as well. Craig Lee says, when Alan Shearer left Newcastle, we really struggled. Spurs should heed that warning. Well, we're going to take more of your calls. Fantastic show so far. Transfer Insiders on TalkSport with Mark Goldbridge. After the break, we're going to talk a little bit about Arsenal chasing that last piece of the puzzle, and also want to have a chat about Manchester United's transfer window. We've not even opened the puzzle yet, let alone started putting the pieces together. Get your calls in 03717 22 3344. Let's reconvene after the break.
Copy that. UAV is on station.
Care package available. Hostile UAV overhead.
UAV is being fuel. RTB is this time.
Drop zone mark. Send it.
Solid copy. Care package deployed at your mark.
Hostile UAV in this sector.
Seismic speculation from the biggest names in the game. Transfer updates throughout the day on TalkSport and TalkSport 2.
And what is it that has to be done as a puzzle in song? Now how do you know if you know how to do?
Hello, this is the Transfer Insiders on TalkSport with me, Mark Goldbridge. We're going to be taking more of your calls. Keep them coming in. Anything you want to discuss transfer related, 03717 223344. Keep those calls coming in. Arsenal chasing the last piece to the puzzle. What do you think about that? Declan Rice and Havertz over the line. Yuri and Timber meant to be coming in very soon. How does that impact Arsenal in relation to the upcoming season? Do we feel that maybe another striker is required? Piers Morgan was on about this in the week. Or actually, we've had a caller in already saying, really, it's that midfield and the defence that we need to look at. Liverpool have looked at that midfield. Dominic Szoboszlai has been announced today officially. He will wear the number 8. And Lavia of Southampton, a player that Arsenal have admired, Chelsea have admired, Man United have admired. Apparently Liverpool looking at a deal there, and another midfielder potentially coming in. I just want to say as well, in relation to Michael of Manchester United, you could describe our transfer activity as slower than a snail's funeral at some times, and certainly over the last 10 years of the Glazers, this has been the case. What are your thoughts on this, United fans? I don't think it's panic stations yet, but when you sign Mason Mount and you're hearing stuff like that may make it difficult to sign anybody else, and you've got a list that's got 5 players on it, and Mason Mount's apparently using up 50% of the transfer budget, it does lead to a concern. And I think that what's going on with Manchester United here is probably underpinned by the greedy Glazers. It was actually the CEO, Richard Arnold, a year ago, when he was interviewed by a set of United fans, said and predicted that this summer transfer window would be a problem. So it can't be a surprise to that CEO or the director of football or the owners. I think United are suffering from the sale issue, where the Glazers are trying to get a little bit more money out, and you know, who cares what happens to the actual football team, which seems to be the most exciting top 4 race in many years. If you look at Manchester City, Arsenal, Manchester United and Newcastle, well, you'd expect Liverpool to join that race. Chelsea are hoping to join that race. It makes it very interesting. It makes it very important when you're analysing what clubs are doing, because some clubs are making some really interesting, efficient business, and others aren't. Let's talk to Connor, who's a Liverpool fan. He actually wants to compare Liverpool and United signings so far. I don't know whether you heard what I said there, Connor, but Liverpool seem to be very active in an area of weakness, whereas Manchester United seem to be very inactive at the moment. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, hi Mark, thanks very much for having me on the show. Yeah, I was just phoned up to talk about the deal there that came through about Nargo with the Szoboszlai signing.
Yeah,
I just thought it was quite interesting, just in comparison with the Mason Mount move. Obviously, Liverpool had been following him sort of for the past couple of weeks or months, and that deal seemed to kind of fall through. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts in terms of sort of comparing the two players and what they bring to the two sides?
Well, I think it's a good point, Connor, because it's something that had slipped my mind as well. I mean, we pretty much know that, well, obviously Erik ten Hag's a big admirer of Mason Mount and signed him, but Liverpool was strongly looking at him as well. Obviously, they had to move to the Hungarian Szoboszlai from Leipzig, and but honestly, I sometimes despair in comparison, because I think it's the argument of the naive football fan sometimes, because I mean, look at Mason Mount last year, look at Havertz last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if both those players play well in different teams with different managers next year. So it's hard to compare. But I think that, well, look, I'll throw it back. What are your thoughts on the quality, on Szoboszlai? Do you feel that he's a player that's going to go straight into your team? He's certainly quite expensive, or do you think that, Klopp might have, it might be a slow burner player? Some of these players do tend to take a year or two.
Yeah, I get your point there. I think in terms of his numbers in the Bundesliga last year, I think it was just under 30 goals. And I think he slots in. He can play the number 8 and he can play the number 10 as well as out in the flanks. So I think it'll be interesting as well. I think the same link up with the likes of Salah. And I think, especially with McAllister, who can sort of play that deeper role, that'll sort of give Szoboszlai the freedom. I think he's a very good playmaker as well, an eye for a goal outside the box. So I think he's a good addition, especially with Liverpool's midfield lacking that sort of that goal creation in recent seasons.
Thanks for calling in, Connor. Appreciate that. I don't like saying what I'm about to say, actually, as a Manchester United fan, but I love football. I think most of us do, and it's not just your own club that you watch. You take in lots of information and lots of games, don't you? I actually think people are sleeping on Liverpool. I think Liverpool's bad season last year should be deleted. I actually think Liverpool next season are going to be back where they were the season before. If you saw Liverpool last year, their defence was so leaky. I remember watching them in the Champions League group stage against Napoli, and it could have been 8 or 9-0. They were dreadful. And it became very clear that people wanted to pin that onto Trent and Van Dijk and the defenders. But it became very, very clear very, very quickly that midfield was just not good enough. And I know Salah had a good season, but I think he can have a much better season. I think a lot was pinned on Mane leaving, which I think was a bit of a red herring. Mane's a fantastic player, but that midfield was dreadful. The fact that Jurgen Klopp is trying to buy 3 or 4 players in that midfield shows you where that manager knows the problem is in that team. If he can sort that midfield out this summer, I don't see any reason why Liverpool aren't back where they were. I think Darwin Núñez has been written off badly. I think I would still take him at Manchester United. I wanted him at Manchester United, and I think he's had that first season. Gakpo's had half a season. I think that Diaz was injured for half a season. Those 3 players, with Mo Salah still there, they will score the goals if the midfield can provide them with the platform. And if you look at Liverpool last year, they were defending a lot more than they normally would. If they sort the midfield out and become that team that can high press and pin teams in, they'll create more chances, they'll score more goals, they'll win more games. I think Liverpool are really dangerous, and it's all going to come down to whether Jurgen Klopp's signings in the midfield do knock them up a level. And I would be concerned as a United fan, as a Newcastle fan, as an Arsenal fan, and potentially even as a Man City fan, because Liverpool have gone toe-to-toe with them before. Let's take a call from, we're going back to Spurs here. Just a quick one from Kenneth. He says, we've given Kane a chance to win a trophy and he didn't turn up. So what would you do with Harry Kane, Kenneth?
Well, look, mate, this is what I'd say about it. If you can get 90 to 100 million for him, then you're gonna have to solve the goals by committee. You're not gonna go and get a player who's anywhere near Kane's level. You're gonna have to go and buy 1 or 2 who make a goal. The narrative that he hasn't had an opportunity to win stuff with us, it's just nonsense. Like, since he's been in the first team, we've been in 2 League Cup finals, 3 FA Cup semi-finals, 2 title races and a Champions League final. Right? You just said yourself, you're a football fan, you take in games, you watch games. Of all the finals and semi-finals we've been in, give me one example where he was a standout player and didn't deserve to be on the losing side. I love Kane. I've been going Spurs for a long time, and I've seen some brilliant players, Bale, Modric, and he's probably my favourite Spurs player of all time. So this isn't a knock. But this narrative that he's not had an opportunity to win something is nonsense. He picked 2 title races and a Champions League final. Look, the 2 title seasons, he was brilliant. Goals, you can't deny, he scored the goals. But my point is that we have been in semi-finals and finals, and let's take the finals, for example, yeah? The 2 League Cup finals and the Champions League. In any of them games, tell me which game he was the best player on the pitch and didn't deserve to lose it.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And this has been levelled to him with England as well, hasn't it? In England, have had opportunities.
And this is the thing. Listen, I love Harry Kane, and I don't want him to leave. Personally, I would keep him for the year. He's going to leave at the end of the year. I think any Spurs fan knows that. He's done his service with us, and he's done well. Give Ange a year with him to actually have an opportunity to get going. But I love Kane, I really do. But like this free, and the thing that doesn't make sense with it either, after those games that we lost, in the papers the next day, social media, he was the player getting called out, never turning up. He didn't turn up and foul. And this Spursy label that we get given, okay, rightfully so, we bottled it in big moments. But I don't get how he gets a free pass now, why everyone's a crusader of Kane needs to go and win something. If Kane goes his career without winning something, that will be as much his own fault as any team he's played for. Because he has had so many opportunities. And you can say in any of them games, okay, we might not have been the favourite or whatever you want to say. But if Kane is the player that Spurs fan knows he is and everyone says he is, then in them games, surely he turns up and he's the reason you win them games.
Thanks for calling in, Kenneth. Very interesting. I think Harry Kane might have been injured in the Champions League final, from my recollection. And also, sometimes it's about the team around you, isn't it? Erling Haaland did nothing in the Champions League final. Man City still won it. Anyway, don't miss TalkSport Breakfast tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Natalie Sawyer and Dean Saunders will be joined by cricketing legend David Bumble Lloyd and Andy Murray's Wimbledon opponent, Ryan Peniston. That's TalkSport Breakfast from 6 a.m. tomorrow. This is the Transfer Insiders show with Mark Goldbridge on TalkSport. We've had some fantastic calls. Keep them coming in, and we'll take more of them after this break.
Racing away, he offloads it to Makinson, flicks the ball, it's basketball stuff now, what a try!
Live Super League, Warrington Wolves versus St Helens.
Stabs the kick through, fullback's missed it, try Warrington!
Thursday evening from 7:45 on TalkSport 2.
Hello, welcome back to the Transfer Insiders on TalkSport with me, Mark Goldbridge. Keep your calls coming in, 03717 223344. But we're into the final 15 minutes of the European Under-21 Championship quarter-final. Ian Abrahams is watching for TalkSport.
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes to go. England 1, Portugal 0, and England just about still in front thanks to that goal from Anthony Gordon in the first half, but they've had a real scare in the second period because Portugal have struck the woodwork. A ball in from the left-hand side, a glancing header by the substitute Enrique Araujo, and it came back off of James Trafford's crossbar. Keeper was beaten on this occasion, and England managed to clear their lines. Portugal have been much better in the second half. England forays forward have been few and far between. It's been much more workmanlike for Lee Carsley's side. We've now brought on Emil Smith-Rowe and Cole Palmer as well to try and perhaps go forward a bit more. One injury problem as well they may have. Jacob Ramsey, that's to hobble off. That's when Smith-Rowe came on. Let's hope that injury isn't too bad. But England are 14 minutes away from a semi-final meeting with a team they beat last Sunday. That's Israel. The last 14 minutes commentary is on TalkSport 2, and it's England 1, Portugal 0.
England holding on there with just under 15 minutes to go. England couldn't hold on today to get the victory in the Ashes game at Lords. After us tonight, we've got following on the Ashes inquest. And in the studio right now is the host and TalkSport cricket editor, John Norman. Afternoon, John. I watched it myself. A very controversial game. It seemed to, well, I mean, Australia were favourites, but that Bairstow stumping was, well, left a sour taste in many England fans' mouths.
I tell you what, I've never seen anything like it. I don't know where to start. There's so many topics and points to discuss coming out of 5 days of another incredible 5 days of action. But I've just hot-stepped it from Lords. I made it over to the studios in London Bridge. I was seeing people arguing in the stands. I was seeing boos, I was seeing catcalls, I was seeing a lot of anger directed at the Aussies, but did they do anything wrong? That's what I want people to get in contact with, and here we are, 2-0 down, 3 to play, and everyone seems quite happy with the style of cricket that we're playing. Is that the wrong way to go about things? Or is the fact that this Ben Stokes side seemingly attracting more non-cricket fans to Test cricket than arguably any team in the history of the game? So plenty to discuss. We're going to be getting on it at 7 o'clock, myself and Steve Harmison. Do not go anywhere.
Thank you very much, John there. It's going to be a cracking show. As I say, I was watching the cricket myself this afternoon. There will be completed before this transfer ends. We've seen Arsenal be very effective so far. I suspect Newcastle will follow up the Tonali signing with more good signings. Chelsea have a huge pot of money to spend now, having got rid of so many players so quickly. Liverpool are focusing on that midfield. Manchester City are Manchester City, and I just think this reminds me a little bit of the season when Jose Mourinho finished second for Manchester United, and there was this expectation that the following year we'd go after Man City. And what happened is we had a very, very, very bad summer transfer window where Liverpool and others did better. We started the season badly, and Jose Mourinho was sacked by Christmas. I'm not saying Erik ten Hag is going to be sacked by Christmas, but what could easily happen is a good season for United could be swallowed up and forgotten by clubs that are proactive and efficient in this transfer window. United have got holes: striker, goalkeeper, centre-back, midfield, and it doesn't look like they've got the budget to do anything about it. And it doesn't matter how good Erik ten Hag is. I personally don't think United would get away with a season like last season, this season, because I think we ground it out last year. And I think the fact that Liverpool and Chelsea fell off allowed us to do that as well. United need a kick up the backside. There is not enough going on. And if they think they can go into next season with the likes of Harry Maguire, Scott McTominay, Anthony Martial, Fred, these types of players as part of your first team squad, it won't wash. It won't work. So what are your thoughts on that? We're going to speak to... Well, let's speak to Cookie, actually, a Man United fan. He said Harry Kane's had his chance to join Manchester United. Is that a good thing that he's not coming to Man United then, Cookie, or is it a thing that you don't want him at United?
Hello, boys. Thanks for having me on. That's not exactly what I said. What I was saying before I came on was your last caller, who's a Spurs fan, was saying about Harry Kane. He's been involved. I mean, Harry Kane is coming out going, I want to win trophies, I want to do this. And your last Spurs caller said he's been involved in a Champions League final, in domestic semis and finals, and he's not turned up. And I absolutely, totally agree with that. He just doesn't turn up. Do your job and score goals. And what he missed out was he's also had the opportunity to do that for England as well. and he failed to turn up. So, with regards,
do you not think, Cookie, if he signed for us United, it's also about the players around him as well? Because I was saying, well, Erling Haaland did nothing in the final, but the players around him did. Would you take Kane at Manchester United, or is that a concern for you that he's a big game?
I personally would, of course, I'd take him, but then the other side is, right, how much is it going to cost? Let's say £100 million, and how long have we got him for? And there's no sell-on value there, is there? It's not my money, of course I'd take it. But, you know, his goals for Spurs have been worthless, really, haven't they? Because they've not, I mean, no doubt he'll do it again this season. But, you know, are the players around him good enough to project, with his goals, to project Spurs into a top four and maybe some domestic cup finals? I very much doubt it with the teams around him. So, you know, if all he's going to get out of his career is a Premier League goal-scoring record, which Haaland will smash to bits anyway, it's absolutely wasted his. I don't understand why he is not. Or we've not even put a bid in for him, have we? Because apparently Daniel Levy has said under no circumstances of selling to another Premiership club. I mean, can he dictate that to a player? You know, or can Harry Kane put a transfer request in?
Well, thanks for calling in, Cookie. I mean, I said this a few weeks ago. I think if Harry Kane wants to sign for Manchester United or Chelsea or whatever, he's got to go public. He's got to put that transfer request in, because everybody knows Man United had this with Berbatov years ago. Daniel Levy will drag it out to August 31st, and you'll end up paying what he wants to pay. And August 31st, you've played 3 or 4 games, you've missed pre-season. Why should you pay 80, 90 million pounds for a striker that's missed a proportion of the season? Because pre-season is part of that preparation. So I think Harry Kane has to put a transfer request in. But then the flip side is, and we've had a few Spurs callers call in, you put a transfer request in, you destroy your legacy at Spurs, don't you? So it's a difficult one for Harry Kane, who may well think, I'm just going to stay for a year, they can't tell me what to do next summer, and maybe things change at Spurs, maybe they don't, and maybe I move on. But I think that's a great point by Cookie as well. You know, were Harry Kane's goals for Spurs last season ultimately worthless? I mean, Erling Haaland was just a machine, but 28 goals in a Premier League season for Spurs by Harry Kane gets completely overlooked. Spurs had a terrible season, and Harry Kane still scored 28 goals. You score 28 goals for Manchester United, you're going to be near the top. You're going to win something. 28 goals in a Spurs side, and they had a dreadful season. You know, he is a world-class striker. And I think people who are not Spurs fans, and some Spurs fans as well, they observe it and go, what a waste. It's not our journey. You know, I think Ruben Neves going to Saudi Arabia is a waste. Not because he's not got the right to go and earn the money in that exciting league, but because it will never be as competitive as the Premier League or the Champions League. And I think you should always be trying to achieve the most from your career. But not everybody else thinks like that. Some people will go to Saudi Arabia. Some people will go to the MLS. Some people will stay at Spurs out of loyalty. But Harry Kane could play for Bayern Munich. He could have played for Man City 2 years ago. He could be playing for Manchester United. He can do that. Whether he does that or not, we'll have to wait and see. Let's speak to Mark. He's an Arsenal fan. He's been waiting for a while, actually. We don't need a striker. You don't want a striker, Mark.
No, mate. I don't think. I would mind a striker, but I think right now that should be our priority.
So your priority at the moment, you've got Declan Rice. What would you do around Xhaka and Partey? Because we've heard they both might go, but if they both go, you need another midfielder. Would you let them go, and who would you bring in, or would you keep one of them to work with Rice?
To be honest, I definitely think we need to keep one of them. I think Partey was a massive part of our success. Well, even Xhaka was a massive part of our success last season as well. So I would like to keep one of them, if not both of them, but I know that's not likely going to happen. I would like to ideally bring in a nice defensive midfielder. I don't see us going out and splashing the cash on someone like Caicedo, but I wouldn't mind taking someone like Lavia from Southampton to boost our depth there.
Just going back to the striker, Mark, because we've been talking about this a bit through the show, how some Arsenal fans, Piers Morgan included, feel that you add an absolute top-class striker into that team like Victor Osimhen, then that's obviously most of the missing piece. You have got Jesus, you have brought Havertz in. Is that enough for Arsenal next season goals-wise, or do you think that there is a spot for a striker in there, whether it's a top striker or a younger type striker?
We'll have to. I think we'll have to see, Mark, because Jesus, I know he's not a prolific goal scorer, but last season he was out for 3-4 months. He's still, I think, banged in about 13, 14 goals. He's a very good team player. As you probably are aware, we've got a lot of young players, Martinelli, Xhaka, Odegaard, they're banging in goals. We've got goals coming from around the pitch. I think this transfer window, we need to focus on our depth. Go ahead next season. If we think next season, right, let's go out and get a prolific one. Splash the cash on someone like a Victor Osimhen, a nice, prolific, goal-scoring striker. But I think for this summer transfer window, we need to just focus on some depth, because I do believe the goals are coming.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let's go to Reese, who's an Arsenal fan, and he thinks he might have a solution. Let's give Balogun a go. Reese, do you think he's good enough?
He proved it. He proved it when he was out on loan last year in the French league, and he looked very good from what I've seen for the USA when he played. I think he deserved his chance. Nketiah got his chance and he didn't really take it. I think it's time for him to move. Whether he gets a loan spell in the Premier League, I don't think any other option's really good enough. I think we should cash in and get what we can for him. But with the centre of midfield, I think we get rid of Xhaka and Partey, but not because they're not good enough. Xhaka has done his part for us, and he's done very, very well. I think he deserves his move. That's already agreed, supposedly, providing we get right. And I think Partey's got some problems behind the scenes that haven't been put out there completely. Because he had a couple of nervy games in the second half of the year. And Jorginho had to fill in, and he did very well. I think Arteta has got plans for Emile Smith-Rowe in the middle of midfield. And I think Havertz will be playing behind Jesus or Balogun. So I think we've got plenty of options. I think if we invest all the money in Rice, yes, we have to get another central midfielder, but it would be good to see Smith-Rowe be played in a number 8 and be trained and utilised there. We've got Zinchenko who can go inside. We've got plenty of options. Arteta likes the mobility around the squad, and then I think we'll be fine.
Thanks very much for calling in, Reese. I mean, that is an interesting option. I can't pretend to know anything about Balogun. I couldn't tell you whether he was going to be good enough for Arsenal, but it actually probably suits better than buying a striker, because if you buy a striker, they want to play. You've got Jesus, he wants to play. Havertz has spent a lot of money on him. You've still got Odegaard, you've got Smith-Rowe. I think a younger profile striker that could break through is probably the dream for most clubs, but it might be the right option for Arsenal. It might well be the right option. Okay, well, we've got Andy Brassel, who's the European football journalist for TalkSport, coming up after the break, and I've got a question about Real Madrid I'd love to ask. Keep your calls coming in, 03717 22 3344. This is the Transfer Insiders on TalkSport with Mark Goldbridge.
TalkSport and TalkSport 2. When I met you in the summer. It's a sizzling summer of live sport. Hear the Lionesses roar in the Women's World Cup.
And they're back in the game!
Plus, live international cricket.
This is what we came for.
This summer on TalkSport and TalkSport 2. Feel late. TalkSport. Totally topical transfer talk.
What a finish!
The Transfer Insiders with Mark Goldbridge on TalkSport.
Arsenal fans laughed at me last year when I suggested that Cristiano Ronaldo would be a great signing for the rest of the season when he left United. Are they laughing now? Do we not honestly think someone like Ronaldo in that...
TalkSport with me, Mark Goldbridge. We're going to go to Andy Brassel now, who's TalkSport's European football journalist, and get the latest on transfer rumours. And Liverpool's new man from Leipzig, Dominik Szoboszlai. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. Loads of calls we've had through the last couple of hours, but I did want to get your opinion on this. We had a Liverpool fan who called in and said, you know, Liverpool were looking at Mason Mount, and obviously he wanted Man United, so we've gone and got Szoboszlai for a little bit more money, actually, and maybe doesn't know that much about him. What are your thoughts on this signing and what Liverpool can expect from him?
I think it's a terrific signing, Mark. A couple of Premier League clubs are interested in him, as we know. Liverpool and Newcastle. He would have fit them as well, very well, I think. What Liverpool were really lacking, as we know last season, is that bit of energy in midfield. He's a genuine box-to-box player. He's proved that he's capable at Champions League level, at a very high level in the Bundesliga, for his national team, where he's led from the front. Despite injury problems that he's put behind him in the past. And, I think he's a great fit for what Liverpool are looking for. He's someone who's going to score goals, he's someone who's going to improve a lot, he's someone who can play the last pass. There's a lot to recommend him, I would say.
I'm going to ask you about what's coming up on the Trans Europe Express at 9 p.m. with yourself and Danny Kelly, but just a little bit of United information, if you could. What's your observation? Because Manchester United time in the Serie A market at the moment, and a lot of Italian reports, but not a lot of UK reports, which always worry me a little bit. What do you think is happening with the goalkeeping situation with Manchester United, and is it looking likely that Onana will, at least a bid will go in for them?
Well, you'd think so. I mean, he is Ten Hag's cup of tea. Ten Hag knows him very well. We know that already. They need a goalkeeper who's much better with his feet. I think Onana has put a lot of the doubts in the past behind him. And remember, Ten Hag couldn't pick him for a while because he wouldn't sign a new contract at Ajax, and therefore they froze him out. So it was a peculiar situation that didn't really have that much to do with the coach. Look, Inter, I think, are in a decent position. We know they need to make money, but on the other hand, they know there's loads of interest in Onana. So I would have thought United need to get on with this, because surely it would be really surprising if Chelsea weren't interested as well. We know they're interested in Mike Maignan, but Milan are in a much more secure position in terms of ownership, in terms of financing, in terms of the fact that Maignan has had an unbelievable couple of years there and become one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Now, Onana's proved a lot in the last season. There's no doubt about that. Taking them all the way to the Champions League finally was a huge part of that. I really think United need to get their skates on. We've seen them dragging their feet over big transfers before. It's clear he wants to go. It's clear Ten Hag wants him. I'm just struggling to see what the hold-up is.
And Andy, just one for me, just observing European football away from the Premier League for a moment. Real Madrid, Benzema's left, Mbappe probably going to run his contract down. What do Real Madrid, to be competitive next season, what do Real Madrid do in that striking department? Anything you've heard in relation to that?
I don't feel there's a massive rush, Mark, because obviously Benzema going has changed the timeline for them. I mean, less than 2 months ago, they thought Benzema was still staying before this huge bolt from the blue contract from Saudi arrived, and they felt they had to let him go. He'd given them 14 years incredible service. So they've had half an eye on replacing Benzema, but like you said, they've been looking at Mbappe's contract situation and thinking they'll pinch him for free come 2024. Now, we've seen that in a situation before they were happy to, even with a year left on his contract, throw nearly 200 million euros at him. What I think has changed now is the fact that they know that Mbappe has, if you like, given PSG a second chance to get it right by signing the last contract, and they haven't really come through in terms of what they've delivered in the transfer market and the sort of team and culture that he wants to see around him. So they do feel that they can play the clock a little bit. The other thing is, he's in for not only all the wages that he's earned on that highly inflated contract that he last signed at PSG, but believe it or not, a 90 million euro bonus if he doesn't go. So he's going to want to be compensated for that. And so he's looking at that. He's looking at the signing on fee that he could get if he goes on a free. And all of a sudden, if Real Madrid sign him now, because they've got to compensate him, not just because of the fee, it becomes really, really expensive. So I think they're happy to stand pat. Okay, if an opportunity arrives, then fair enough. But they've signed Joselu. Don't laugh. I know he's had his moments in the Premier League, but he's a guy who's scored a lot of goals over the last couple of seasons for clubs, not particularly successful clubs in La Liga. So he's done a great job. He's done a good job for the Spanish national team. And I think they look at him doing a similar job that what he does with Spain. Being that Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting figure who can hold the fort, who can bring other players into play. I think that's really important. So, look, if there's an opportunity out there, I'm sure they'll go and get it. But I don't think there's any massive urgency for them because we've seen Real Madrid cutting back in previous years and still managing to be competitive in the Champions League.
Andy, we've got full time in England under 20.